people just go there and have their own little gatherings, not to get too far into that, as well as others may just come in and try to steal copper and whatnot from the vacant place because there's going to be no one to stop them. So with a vacant detached home, you want to try to do some things to make it look like somebody is actively stopping by and visiting, even if you're not there all the time. But you want to make sure that it does look occupied. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. I'm Hayes Hartwig, and these are the stats for February. So Vancouver did have a slight dip, but it has otherwise been pretty leveling out for the rents in the Greater Vancouver area. Live.rent, our friends down there who help us out with the stats, have reported that Metro Vancouver has had a average rent of $2,069. This is down $42 from last month and only $51 from December. So as I said, it is gradually declining a bit. However, the rents seem to be kind of leveling out a little bit as opposed to the typical bombing down that it has been. That being said, we are still $228 less than it was in February of last year. So it is a fair amount of drop from year over year, but it kind of seems to be leveling out a little bit, and perhaps we might see some improvement sooner than later. We have also seen that as you go further east, they're having bigger declines than towards downtown Vancouver. So essentially, the further east you go, the least rent gets. That's typical, but also the declines have been greater further east, including around Surrey Central Station, which has been showing a decline of 14%. So it's a pretty big drop. The causes for this, again, as we have covered in previous shows, is from the immigration that's been coming in or lack thereof, as well as the student visas. Surrey Central Station has both UBC and SFU campuses there, which did have a lot of international students. So that is likely what has been causing the pressure out there, along with the amount of new builds and basically buildings there that are not being filled right now. So it is a bit of a race to the bottom out around Surrey Central Station and further east. So again, we'll see how things improve once they open up immigration again and start getting the student visas going out again. We'll probably see a fairly good recovery, I would suspect, just because there'll simply be more people trying to move into these units that are currently vacant. From speaking to some of the other property managers that we do within our network, they have been showing that it has been picking up, as well as personally for our business at Vancouver Rent It, we've noticed that there seems to be a little bit more demand coming in for rentals. So we may be seeing the recovery and the improvement starting, but of course we'll have to look at the stats next month to figure out what's going on with that and to see if we are in fact in a recovery stage and have possibly hit the bottom. Now, in news that has been rolled out recently with the BC budget, it appears that there is talk of adding 7% PST now to both property management and strata management. So it hasn't been fully confirmed, as it's a little bit murky. We are looking into that, but that may increase the cost of renting out your units on both sides, because your strata fees obviously will go up now that there's an additional 7% on the management part of it. They're obviously not going to eat that. So you may end up seeing strata fees going up a little bit due to that, as well as the fact that your property management fees may go up as well, which will generally get passed on. So we will see how that goes. It, again, hasn't been 100% confirmed as to if that's going on, but we will have to see what's going on with that. Now, I did touch before on the fact that we do have a slower market and it has been kind of leveled out there. And one of the things that we have been noticing is that currently having a furnished unit is a bit of a detriment. So if you're trying to rent out your furnished unit and having troubles doing that, you may want to consider unfurnishing it. simply for the fact that with less people coming here, which is usually who needs a furnished unit, you may want to deal with more of the locals who generally already have their own furniture and would be kind of strange if they didn't. So it may be a red flag if you have a local that's suddenly looking for a furnished unit. You may want to understand why they don't have their own furniture. So would be something to look into to sort of protect your investment, as it were. So speaking of protecting your investment, we are continuing to look at the Residential Tenancy Branch, the RTB, and we have found out that it is correct that the arbitrators don't actually rely on precedent. So this being said, the previous accounts of what happened, the previous rulings, and that from the arbitration won't have too much of an effect on the current one. They treat each case as a separate case. So although it seems like you're in a court proceeding, it's not really. It's basically whatever the arbitrator decides at that point in time is where they go with. It doesn't have to have any basis. It just could be whatever they're feeling that day. So do keep that in mind if you're intending to go to the RTB, that whether you look at the previous cases or not, it may or may not have any point to it, which is really difficult because you can't, on both sides, as a landlord and as a tenant, have any understanding of what the result will be because they don't base it on anything that previously happened. So it's very difficult to prepare for a case, and it's basically a crapshoot at best. So as a previous colleague coined, they said that arbitration is arbitrary at best, which is showing to be more and more accurate. It also makes up the question of the false sense of security that happens simply for the fact that the RTB, as of last year, made this big announcement that they're going to post all the results of all the arbitrations 2 weeks after they are handed down, and you can review them and go through them and so on and so forth. But if they're not going to rely on previous decisions from the RTB, then who cares? Why are we looking at past cases? They have absolutely no application to the current case. So I think that there's a few issues that we are discovering through the RTB processes, and they need to be addressed because I think that it is basically making people feel that there is protection when there's not really. It's just kind of as the wind blows and we go with whatever the arbitrator decides. So I hope that there is some more transparency through the arbitration. I hope that they start to actually follow their own rulings, or at least meet and make sure that they start to do that, because otherwise, what is the point of the exercise if they're not going to follow their own rulings? It doesn't make sense to me. So it's a very difficult situation to look at, and hopefully there will be some changes eventually, but there needs to be some that happens. So now we have talked about how the market is fairly slow, and we've been seeing it on both sides and whatnot. So one of the things that we have to address is when your place is vacant, there needs to be some preparations and ways that you can protect your investment and make sure that you're not going to end up with some problems later. So we do want to take a look at certain items to check off to make sure that when your home is vacant between tenants, that you aren't accidentally setting yourself up for failure. So a couple of the main ones to deal with is your insurance. There are different insurance products. One of them is vacant home insurance. So if you do have a vacancy, even that's going to be for a month, we're currently halfway through February, and if your home has not been rented yet, you may want to look at vacancy insurance if you don't have it already. The reason for this is because they do want to make sure that you check in on your place. They want to make sure that things are done and prepared, and there are different clauses in different insurance that you will have to adhere to. So make sure that you speak with your insurance provider, insurance broker, whomever you're getting your insurance from, and make sure that you are adhering to the rules, because some of them they want you to stop by once a week, some of them 2 times a week, and so on and so forth. So make sure that you read the fine print so that you don't inadvertently render your insurance useless in case something happens. Chances are nothing will, but you don't want to leave yourself exposed just in case. You also want to make sure to switch the utilities into your name. Now, a lot of landlords forget about this part, and it can be tricky. We just ran into a situation where a landlord did. Luckily, we had some showings, so when we came to the showing in the day, no lights worked. That was a little bit off-putting, of course, for the tenant, but more off-putting was the fact that the fridge and freezer were no longer running, so the ice that had built up inside the freezer had then melted and was starting to leak onto the floor, which of course can ruin your laminate floors. So you want to make sure that you keep track of your utilities and put them back into your name. The next tenant, of course, will take that over, but you want to make sure that it's there. It also makes it easier for showings, especially with the temperatures going down. Walking into a cold place that's dark with no power, it's not the most welcoming. It probably will push away the tenants that are thinking about looking at it because it doesn't feel like home. So you want to make sure that you switch those utilities back into your name so that you can keep on with the power, the heat, and make sure that you don't have ice melting onto your floor and thus wrecking things, because that would be problematic for you, of course. You also want to make sure that you turn off your water. So go around to the toilets, go around to where your sinks are in the kitchen and just turn those to off, simply for the fact that if no one's there and something bursts, you may end up with water all over your floor, causing a flood. And again, that's going to be really expensive to fix and obviously be more vacancy and have to hit up your insurance, which may or may not be valid depending on if you switched it to vacant home insurance. So you want to make sure that all of these things are happening to protect your home the best you can. In a detached home, of course, there's main water shutoffs. Go ahead and use those. Some of the newer condos have main water shutoffs, so of course, use the main if you can. That being said, with the detached homes, there's a couple other items that you want to make sure to take care of. So with a detached house, if it is vacant, you want to make sure that you mow your lawn and pick up the leaves, make it look a little bit more lived in, and consider adding the lighting that you plug in and it'll turn on lamps from time to time so that the house looks occupied. The reason for this is because you don't want to attract people that think that it's unoccupied. You maybe end up with some squatters. People just go there and have their own little gatherings, not to get too far into that, as well as others may just come in and try to steal copper and whatnot from the vacant place because there's going to be no one to stop them. So with a vacant detached home, you want to try to do some things to make it look like somebody is actively stopping by and visiting, even if you're not there all the time. But you want to make sure that it does look occupied. So that's basically all we have for the February stats. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next month with the stats as well as some guests. Thank you for listening. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast.